Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. Joining me today, I can't even speak today, Micah. It's already been a day already this morning, but Micah Curran's joining me today. So, Micah, how are you doing?
Apparently better than you are.
Apparently,
It's okay, my friend. It's early and we're just kind of shooting the breeze and
yeah,
yeah, it's another day.
it is, and it's another day, and it's actually a beautiful day. It's actually nice out, which means, in a little bit I'll have to go out on the rugby field with fifth graders and run around with them and teach them more rugby skills. They're going to be playing against teachers on May 7th. So I'm really trying to get the teachers trained and the students trained so they can have a good game on that day. But that's not what we're going to talk about today, which I jokingly told Micah before we recorded that this is going to be a cash or trash episode because we're not really sure how this is going to go. But kind of the genesis of the idea is I was, like most people, browsing through Instagram or TikTok and just looking at reels, and I came across this interview, and I can't remember who was interviewing, but the interviewee was Tucker Carlson, which you might know from Fox News, you might know from the Tucker Carlson Network, TCN. Very well-known conservative pundit who, is was a very big supporter of President Trump and his platform. And what was surprising about this interview was that he was talking about his remorse, about feeling like he had misled his listeners to voting for Trump because of all the stuff that's happened within the 2 years of his presidency, broken promises, a platform that he believed in. Especially there was a thing about transparency and just the way things have been handled with the Epstein files, with the war in Iran, and everything else has really kind of rubbed a lot of the president's biggest supporters, both politically and through and media wise, has really kind of changed their tone, and they're kind of sitting in this weird like space where they're still conservative with their political views and their values, but they're kind of like struggling, almost like feeling with a sense of regret, remorse, don't really know how to feel. It's almost like it's kind of like a numbing sensation across the board with, people like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, and like all the people who are big supporters of him are like, uh-oh, I think we made a mistake. Um, so and the reason why for this idea is to kind of look at like from the church side, from the Christian side, because there's a lot of Christians, a lot of evangelicals who voted for Trump in this last election statistically, and kind of what are they feeling? What are they kind of, because a lot of times, and Micah, maybe you may have seen this, and where there's sometimes where he'll do something or he'll make a decision, and a lot of times there'll be people that I know who voted for him who are pastors or fellow Christians who are defending him, like, oh no, this is great, this is great, this is great, like in regards to ICE and to immigration reform, like, oh no, great, great, great. And then just probably recently, within the last 2 to 3 weeks, it has been deathly silent anytime when something happens. No big like, hey, no, we support this, or hey, this. It's just been like dead across like all my social media platforms. So I don't know if they're dealing with that stuff too. And so I don't know. It's for me, I'm kind of always like everyone, like we always talk about how I'm more middle of the road politically, so I'm kind of a more of a moderate or independent. You've talked about you being more conservative in your political views. So I don't know, Michael, like kind of talk to me about kind of what you're experiencing. Are you seeing the same thing from the people who voted for him? Are you kind of, you know, like that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to understand what that feeling is that I'm seeing across a lot of my feed where people are just really wrestling with this.
So yeah, I think a number of things. Like I saw the same video that you saw with Tucker Carlson, and um, I mean, we could probably spend 6 hours on this Zoom call and probably make a six-part series if we really wanted to be. Probably more, I mean, more like hours of just conversations of different topics in respect to politics and social media avenues and news networks, and um, how that hamster wheel can kind of persuade us to vote one way or another, or feel one way or another, or, and I'm guilty of that. Like,
Hmm.
um, I watch news every day, and I have really, I don't want to say feel convicted about it, but just have really tried to limit myself with how much I expose myself to every day. And not saying things aren't real, not saying things don't happen. I, I think that there are far worse things in the world happening than some of the things that some of these big news conglomerate, media conglomerates focus on.
Hmm.
And not to say that, you know, immigration isn't important, not to say that um, the war in Iran isn't important, not to say that stuff going on with the leadership in their country isn't important, but,
Hmm.
you know, there are things in this world where, there's epidemics of different current events that don't get talked about on a regular basis. But
Yeah.
like, I think you're right. I think that there is this kind of, I don't want to say remorse, but certainly the platforms that these folks have, like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and others, that you know people follow them, people watch them, people are engaged with what they do and say. And during Trump's campaign for office in 2024, there was a massive following um, online for President Trump, because he went and did these interviews with Joe Rogan. He did interviews with um, what's his name, Theo Vaughn.
Theo
Theo
Von,
Van.
yeah.
He's another big social media person that has a massive following, and Dave Ramsey did an interview with President Trump, like others, just to have decent social media followings. And um, you know, I want to preface this conversation with, like, people are very quick to turn a dime on somebody like, well, in this day and age, anybody, right? But
Yeah.
like, especially somebody in leadership like President Trump, or, Secretary of Defense or Secretary of whatever, or uh, Tucker Carlson, because he was this big news anchor on a pretty decent sized platform. And now he even has his own network. And, you know, it's very quick. We're really quick to turn a dime on them if we disagree with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I want to also preface with, I think that things happen. You know, I, I didn't know really. I mean, I knew that, like, you and I grew up in a time where war in the Middle East was just a thing, because there was terrorists and there was terrorist groups and they were out of
Hmm.
control. And then we lived through 9/11, and
And even like just dictator regimes,
yeah,
like
Saddam Hussein,
Saddam
and
saying like Operation Desert Storm, like we lived through all that.
right. And so, like, when we turned the TV on a couple weeks ago and we hear that, you know, we're kind of tag teaming with Israel, and, we're in a war with Iran, it's like, wait, this again? Like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And
Yeah.
but I want to say that things happen, and if they were building a nuclear weapon and having the ability to build a nuclear weapon and plan to attack us, and which none of that has been presented, right? None of that has um, been said in respect to um, what's being told to us on a news network. But it's it's really hard for me to wrap my head around. I know that's one of the more prominent events happening in um, the news cycle now. Um, I just don't. I don't know if I buy into the notion of, you know, oh, we're at war again, so President Trump is, it's all President Trump's fault, and I have remorse for. being a
Yeah.
supporter of him. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does a little bit. I mean, and I think, and I think kind of
Oh, I want to say one other thing real
yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
I was scrolling through the Today Show was on Insta or TikTok, I'm sorry. And the Today Show is an NBC
Yeah.
show, and
Hmm.
um, one of the anchors, what's her name, Jenna Bush,
Hmm.
whatever, I don't know what her married name is, but that's President George W. Bush's daughter.
Yeah.
She works for NBC News, and just recently she did an interview series with um, former President Bush, former President Obama, former President Clinton, and
Uh-huh.
former President Biden, and like just kind of like hallmarking the 250th anniversary of our country.
Yeah.
And it was like a series about, what's it like being president and what's it like not being president like now that you're not. And um, all the comments in these videos were, Scott, were like, oh my gosh, I miss these people, and like what a gem these people were. And like it's interesting, like the topic that we're talking about today, but like people were like, man, these people were beloved as president. And now they're like, oh, we miss them. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how respected they were in that office despite their political affiliation.
Yeah. And kind of in regards to that with, because I saw like a couple of those interviews. And You know, one of the things that I find fascinating is a lot of times when people are in office, I mean, like with any leader, when you're a leader of an organization and people don't like the decisions you make or kind of how you're handling um, the culture around you or how you're shaping the culture, not only within your office, but maybe how it's influencing the world. Um, some people could be critical, but then at the end, when they're no longer in power and you're now talking with them, you kind of start to be like, oh, okay, like here's this, here's that. Like they seem like normal people, which I mean they are. I mean, these weren't like big wigs. They just got elected into one of the highest offices that you can hold um anywhere, I guess, unless you're the Pope, depending on if you're Catholic or not. But I think a lot of times when people see these people talk and how they talk about different things, and even like when you've seen like things like when was it I'm trying to think who was the last president who passed away. Oh, was it George H.W. Bush who was the
Yeah.
last president who passed away? And you see the interactions between like the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas. And it's like, like every time like they always talk about, oh, Michelle and George's like playful banter that they have. And it's like, okay, like, what's always portrayed. And this is why I think, Michael, when you mentioned like you tried to really limit yourself on how much media we consumed, especially with news media, because it always kind of made it out in the moment that these are like the most bitterest rivals that you have. Like they're clashing, they hate each other. And then you go and you sit and you're watching a funeral and you just see how like buddy, buddy, chum, chum they are. And you're just like, oh, that's different from what I'm being told about that relationship. And I know a lot of times people talked about, I know the book, the interview with Jenna and George W., which was, how do you have those repair those relationships of families who've been divided politically? Which I know when I first got here and started a small group, that was probably one of the biggest things about how, oh, me and my family aren't talking because of just political differences, and not necessarily that they have a different politics, but just the way it was handled, where it got heated, probably some words that were said that probably cut down to the core that really hurt them. And they're just like, I don't want to engage in any of this because it's just becoming too toxic. And kind of the idea of going back to like, how is this shaping the church now and people and Christians? Because I think, a lot of times when and I'll point out someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was really big about the Epstein files, full transparency, releasing it all, getting it all out in the public, support for the victims. And we have seen, and I think the expectation of what someone like a MTG wants to see and kind of what really happened really rubbed her the wrong way, where she's not running for reelection anymore. Like she's done with kind of this political thing. And, I think when we look at the church who said, we voted for a specific platform because we believe that is the quote unquote Christian platform. And then you see everything unfold before your eyes. You see the news stories, you see all this evidence coming out, and you begin to start saying, okay, I don't think this is exactly what I voted for. And I think there's a lot of people who are kind of coming to that realization going, this isn't like whatever I thought this was going to be, this isn't it. And now I don't know what to do because I know I don't have the same views or the same type of political views on the other side of the aisle. But right now, I don't feel comfortable in the camp I'm in now. And I don't know what to do.
Well, I would say one of two things. One, you know, we might as well just say it as it is. Like when the 2024 election happened, you had Trump and you had Kamala Harris, and it was like, okay, Biden announced 2 months before the, whatever. What was it? Like, when did he announce that he wasn't going to run?
It was like the same, it was that same election year.
No, I
So
know. I mean, like it was like the
I feel
summer,
like it was,
maybe.
I don't think it was I think it was probably I feel like it was almost 6 months before the election. He announced that he
Okay,
wasn't going to
so in the middle of the
run.
summer,
Yeah.
something like
So
that. So
I'd say
like,
like maybe April, like I would say it's kind of like maybe April or May sometime. Like it was very quick. Or wasn't
so
quick. It was very long because he kept saying he was running, he was running, he was running, and then eventually he's like, "I'm not running anymore." So then it was like Kamala Harris got pushed to the forefront to start campaigning.
here's my thing, and
Yeah,
this isn't coming from conservative or a liberal or whatever. I'm just saying, like, I feel like the Democrats shot themselves in the foot because Joe Biden decided not to run for reelection, and then they didn't have a primary, and they didn't have any sort of like there was no question of who was going to run for president in 24 on the Democratic ticket, and it was
yeah,
just all of a sudden Kamala was it, and
yeah,
um, there was such a backlash in our country of the way that the Biden administration ran things. I think that why would they elect Kamala? But I also want to say too, and like I don't want to get into this like who's right, who's wrong,
yeah,
but like I also want to say that like it's just back to the funeral thing.
yeah,
There was a clip of President Obama and President Trump like just chumming it up at the funeral.
yeah.
And I want to ask you this, like, do you think that it's an act sometimes? Because like, on one hand, Michelle and George W are just loving each other and it's good old buddy buddies. And then, you know, you got Trump down like down the aisle in the church, Trump and Obama like just chumming it up like they're the best friends and uh hey, well, I'll meet you for coffee next week. Like it's just and then you'll turn the news on and then it's like, well, we hate Trump or we hate Obama or
Yeah.
and it's
It.
like
I
it's very
think
frustrating.
and I feel like it's well. I think this goes back to. I think this kind of goes back to kind of the culture that we're in now. You know, I mean, you look at old videos of like when John McCain was running for president or Mitt
Oh, that
Romney
seems
when
like a
he was running
lifetime
for
ago.
president. And, there'd be these people who would say, like, oh, this person's this bad. And they're like, oh, no, we may disagree on how to deal or handle with, we had different philosophies of how to deal with certain topics or situations that our country faces. But generally, this is a person who has a wife, has kids, a family person. Like, they're a human being. Like, that's it. And now, like, so, like, even like with that, like when you have like Obama and Trump chumming it up, like, and when you're watching, and I think that's the thing, like, when you're watching that and you have been indoctrinated with just like how much these two people hate each other, and you see they're chumming up, then you kind of get to a point where go, well, is this an act? Is this like, are they really good? Are they really good like chummy chummy? Is this just kind of like just being polite because you're in a thing and cameras on you? So we're just going to be like, oh yeah, ha, 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 okay, now get away from me. I don't like you. Like it's one of those bizarre things where if you're the casual viewer and you've been told all your life that these two people absolutely hate each other, and then you go and you watch an event where they have to be together and they're all like laughing and jumping and slapping on the back and side hugging each other. You kind of have to sit, you go like, well, okay, is this truly how they act in real life? And it's just everything's being spun in the media to really cast this divide so that I have to be either on this side or I'm on this side. And if and whatever side I'm on is the right side, and if on the other side, it's the wrong side. Like, have we gotten to a point where everything has been so much absolutes between what's right, what's wrong that, you know, and again, well, I'm being told this is the right way, and I'm being told by all these like kind of like Christian political outlets that this is the right way to do things. So I am going to be on the right side of history and vote this way and everything else. And then you watch everything unfold that all these things that haven't came to fruition yet, or things that you were promised, you're seeing the exact opposite happen. And you sit there and you go, you, am I still on the right side of history at this point? And struggle with that. And I feel like that's what Tucker Carlson is struggling with. The Theo Vons and the Joe Rogans are struggling with. They're like, did we completely? And it's not necessarily the I voted for the wrong person. It's like because of my platform, I have now convinced a bunch of people that this is the right way to vote. And now we're seeing all these things, which now me as the host is getting to a point where I fundamentally disagree with everything I'm seeing. But yet, a couple of years ago, I was really for this and I was pushing it and I was promoting it and I was telling all the people that I influence, this is the way you need to go. And now I feel bad about it.
Well, I don't
And
think it's on the person that influenced it. I think it's
well,
on
yeah,
the person doing it. It's like, well, we elected a person to do a job and they're not doing it, and it's like that's not on the people that were
yeah.
supporting that person.
And
Yeah,
that's and
and
I
then
think
you go ahead.
well, and you're right about that because as much as we could say, even though they may be feeling that like, oh, I screwed up or I did something, in reality, you had the same information everyone else had.
Mhm.
Whether you vote Republican, whether you vote Democrat, whether you are a Christian, a Hindu, whatever, you had the same information that everyone else had. And if you wanted to get more information, you had the tools to really dig down, do your research, dig into all these different sources. Like, I mean, at least how I was trained, how you were trained, to really look at everything. And then at the end, you say, okay, this is my decision, and I'm going to stand by my decision because I have informed myself based with all the research I've done. I've informed myself to do this. So at the end of the day, if you are someone who's saying, hey, to your audience, I think this is the best way because I've had this person interview, here's their platform, we've talked, we've debated, we've done all this stuff, and yes, and then all of a sudden the carpet gets pulled underneath you. Like, I wouldn't blame anybody who influence someone to vote, who influence people to think about certain things a certain way to kind of help steer them to vote a certain way and realize that, oh, well, sorry, you guys, I was lied to. And because I was lied to, I felt like that I lied to all my influencers, all the people I influence. And that's not anyone's fault. That's not definitely not their fault. But I understand dealing with the emotion and the trauma because when you're a leader, I think that's the thing. Like when you're a leader, even when you're a pastor, like even if something happens and you make a decision and somebody doesn't like the decision you made, and because of that they leave the church, I mean, that's a weight. That's something where you go like, even though you feel like your board feel like you made the right decision, this was the right decision, the church voted in a way that was the right decision, but now you have a person who maybe you were close with, or maybe they were like the best volunteer you had in your church leave because they didn't like the decision. Like that's a weight to carry. But at the same time, that's not your fault. Like this is if you did everything that you were supposed to do based on your bylaws, based on everything, and you had everybody have a choice, and this is the way the cards lied, then that's the way it is. And sometimes people are going to be okay with it. Sometimes people are going to be against it, and you kind of move on. Um, but yeah, I think so. Kind of going back to the thing with the church, like I want to know how many pastors, because there's a lot of times where even though, and I don't know, Micah, because I feel like after the Johnson Amendment got like kind of got erased or overturned, I'm not sure what the technical rule is, where now ministers can kind of support, or Christian organizations or any religious organization can like support a candidate now because it's not illegal anymore. Um, I want to know how many pastors are sitting in that same boat that Tucker's sitting in, dealing with that. And how many of them are just kind of like, well, I'm just going to move on and that's it, or they still stand by it, or they regret it. Like, I don't know. But I think kind of just with our conversation, it's like, like anything else, if you're told something and you see the evidence and you look at the data and you do the research and you feel like that this is the best deal and you're going to go with it, whether that's politics, whether it's business, whether it's getting a new refrigerator for your church, whatever the case may be, and you find out you got swindled or things aren't working out the way you were promised, I mean, that's not your fault, right? Like that's not your fault at all. If you told everyone this is the way it has to be, and then all of a sudden it's not. Like, I don't know. I mean, even just I feel like even within this conversation, there's still this like uncomfortable tug of how we understand that. And even like for you and me, who even though politically we may have different points of views, but we are able to come together and be cordial and talk about things and be respectful of each other. It's hard to talk about this because I feel like there is that weight. And even like when I talked to my dad the other day, I was talking to him about something insignificant. I was talking to him to just like pray for a couple situations that that me and that me and my family were going through, and we were just talking, and my dad just kind of made the quote, the world's gone crazy, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, maybe my dad's struggling with this too. Because I
Yeah.
know I mean, my dad's very vocal on social media. Like he's very vocal about the tariffs and how he thinks it's stupid, even as a finance person. But then there's other things he's very much supportive politically of what's happening in the world. And he kind of always says his stuff. But now it's just like he's just kind of at this place where it's just like, man, everything's just crazy now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it goes back to if you go back to this idea of, well, what makes things great? Whether it make America great again, make the church great again, make all this great again, you know, and when people are looking at the interviews that Jeb Bush did with all the presidents, former presidents, and looking at those videos of like funerals or any type of President's Day gatherings, and they're just kind of very cordial, or even like when you have a couple politicians who are on different sides of the aisles and they're talking to each other and like, hey, even though we disagree about a lot of things, here are some things we do agree with, and here's kind of the bill or the resolutions we're putting in place to try to deal with this issue in America, or to deal with trying to get the government back open, or to do these type of things. And you see those little moments in the media and you go, that's what made things great. The
Yeah.
fact that we could have disagreements, but we could still be respectful to each other, can still talk to each other, and still feel like our opinion is valid, even if that other person disagrees with my opinion. At least they still validate me in my opinion, even though they disagree with it. And that's the stuff I don't think we're seeing a lot of anymore. It's usually just dumpster fire, dumpster fire, dumpster fire, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to put out these fires? And by doing it, we're just thinking, well, hey, it would be good if we just poured gasoline on it because it's a liquid, so that'll put it out, right? And I mean, so
Well, I think in respect to the church,
mhm,
um, you know, Jesus said to love God and love each other.
yeah,
And um, in- even in the New Testament, uh, I want to say it's First Timothy. uh, It's one of the Pauline epistles, but it talks about praying for your elected officials
yeah,
and how hard is it to pray for somebody you disagree with.
yeah,
Um, I think it still boils down to the issues and not the person.
hmm,
And whether you were a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, whatever, it's it's hard to pray for somebody you disagree with. And it's hard to have a conversation with somebody you disagree with. And it's, you know, there are going to be people that support stuff that's different than you. And that's okay because that's what democracy is. And another thing to take it a step forward is how informed are you on said issues? You know, immigration, abortion, war, foreign policy, um, who's in Congress, who's in the Senate, who's, and, the majority power of each of those branches of government. Um, what's the Supreme Court voting on? Like, there's all of these different components, but like at the end of the day, you know, it's, I think it comes back to the issues at hand. And I don't think the pulpit should be a place where political issues should be expressed on a weekly basis or um,
hmm,
that narrative should be shared with our congregations. Like I think it's something that we, similar to salvation, we need to figure it out and work it out on our own.
yeah,
But it's it's just very troubling to see kind of this tugging, you know. It just also proves too that like, okay, let's just say we have 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, 4 years of Trump again. It proves that there's just such a difference of opinion and polarization in ethics, polarization in politics, polarization and views on how we should handle things. Um, and I think too that that's another thing. It's like, why do we have to go to the extreme on every single issue? Like,
yeah,
why do we have to like, off with their heads? And it could be like over paper or plastic bags at the supermarket. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, it's just so toxic. And you mentioned their small group earlier, and it's like it's just a shame that we can't just sit down and have a conversation.
yeah. And I think a lot of that is because
Even in the church.
even in the church, and a lot of it is because of what's being modeled. Like, I mean, I think I've talked a lot of times, or I know other people who, they would talk about a Bible or they'll read a Bible passage, and all of a sudden someone gets mad because they feel like that they're making a political statement. It's like, I just read Romans
I
6.
thought you were gonna say it's not King James or it's not
No, no,
E-
no. Like,
ESV or whatever.
it's like, well, it's like I just read Romans 6 or I just read Romans, like you talked about. I think it's Second Timothy chapter 2 verses 1 through 2 where Paul's writing to Timothy about pray for those who are in leadership, right?
Yeah.
Like you could read that verse and someone could take that and go, "Oh, I really need to pray for all of our leaders because, whether I agree with them or disagree with them, we need to pray for them because We hope that, God's wisdom will be upon them to really make good decisions for the betterment of our country. And then some people could say like, "Oh, you're telling me that I should support this person or I should support this president that I don't like." And it's like, "No, I just read the scripture. I didn't say anything. How you're interpreting it." And if you're getting so irate about me reading a Bible verse and not even giving any commentary on it, or the only commentary is like, "Hey, we should always be good at praying for our leaders, regardless on if we agree with them or not." And you're taking that and telling me that, and you're telling me, Pastor, that you're forcing me to pray for this person that I don't like, or the mayor that I don't like, or the governor I don't like. I'm like, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
And yet, and I think that's kind of goes back. We got into this whole thing where it's always a extreme reaction to everything. And a lot of times, when someone has such a big emotional reaction, there usually is because there's some type of hurt that is deep down it, is
Yeah.
wounded in the bottom in their heart. And that could be anything from, "Oh, I shared my political opinion about something and just wiped totally got wiped away, or I lost family members, or I lost friends, or it could just simply
Like,
be,
well, like let's say, and this is just me throwing it out there, like, just an example, right?
yeah,
Like abortion's always a hot topic.
yeah,
You know, you could be say, hey, I'm for it or I'm against it, and then somebody in your church, let's just somebody in your small group had an abortion. That's going to trigger that person,
oh yeah,
and it's going to give them, you know, post traumatic stress syndrome or whatever, and they're going to get upset, and you may or may not know that.
yeah,
And so, boom, there's a prime example of like why,
yeah.
people get so upset about things.
Yeah, or even sometimes it could just be just like that, like, "Oh, I've dealt with that," or when people start talking about veteran benefits,
Mm,
or housing for veterans, or that's an issue, and you see this stuff happening and you go, "Well, as a former veteran, I'm seeing what the government's doing to our men and women who are trying to serve us and protect us here in the country or overseas, and I'm not happy with it." So I'm getting irate, or like when the government, and again, like, I don't know like what every single thing happens, but if the government shuts down and you're a veteran and you need an emergency surgery and you have to go to the VA, and all of a sudden you can't get your surgery because the government shut down
mm,
because they can't agree on something, and they just let everything shut down because they couldn't agree on a bill to fund the government, then there's some woundedness that happens there. Or maybe the spouse of a veteran who their loved one passed away because the government was shut down and their loved one couldn't get the life-saving care that they needed because people are too busy playing politics and not really focusing on the people who really need that help.
yeah. Well, we also live in a culture where it's like, oh, almost like, how dare you change your mind,
Yeah.
right? Like you could have an opinion on something and then change your mind, and people were just like so quick to turn on you because you changed your mind about something. But like also too, like something that we're so concerned about labels and like Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, and it's like, I just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you support this, or just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean you support that. And it's
Yeah.
like, man, I just, similar to you and I, like just having these conversations. Like, I love just having conversations with people and trying to understand why
Yeah.
they they think the way they think. And I had a friend, and I won't say his name. He came to visit me in the hospital last fall, and he was like, "Man, I hate Trump."
Yeah.
But we had a conversation about it, and he's like, "But I love you," talking to me. And
Hmm.
he's like, and I love that we can have a conversation about things.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just, why can't more people have those conversations? I think it's what it boils down to, both in the church, in the world, politically, not politically. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, it's something that's always baffled me, and it's gotten worse as we've gotten older.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Oh, goodness. So, yeah, so friends, let us know what you think. What are you dealing with? Are you seeing kind of this tug, this struggle that you're seeing within your family, within yourself, within your churches? We would like to know. So if you have something, you have a story to share, feel free to email us, comment us, throw something in the comment section, and we'll read it on the air and kind of reflect on it at our next episode. So, friends, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be back on with another episode. Take care.
That's your trash.
Catch your trash. Thank you for listening to the Scott Stedman Podcast. The Scott Stedman Podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. We thank listeners like Patty and Scott, whose support goes to this podcast's continual growth and maintenance. If you want to support this podcast, you can do so in a number of ways. First, feel free to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed this episode and share it with your friends. If you'd like to financially support the Scott Stedman Podcast, you can go to the website ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. That website again is ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.